United States submarine base at Key West, Florida. A dispatch that quoted President Truman's press secretary, Charles Ross, as saying that President Truman has no knowledge of any secret project by this government that would give substance to the existence of such objects. Ross also said that both the Air Force and the Navy deny that such objects exist.
I've experienced such adversity that the fact that I am here tonight is testament to my fucking strength.
I don't know what you're saying.
Thank you for saying that because I have something so terrible.
Oh, you're going to tell a story?
Yeah.
Well, first off, who are you?
I am revolted.
Hi,
Also
revolted.
Chelsea. I'm Dad.
Good one.
Thanks. Who are you?
Well, are you gonna say your shit? I'm Noelle.
Yeah. Hi, Noelle. I'm revolted. I know I'm gonna start dry heaving again. Okay. I went to a wedding and we stayed in a big ass farmhouse and the entire basement, like bottom part. Yeah.
Whose farmhouse?
It was like an Airbnb.
Okay.
And the entire like bottom living area, fully furnished. They had an entire game room. When I say an entire game room, it was like mansion size where they had like a basketball thing, arcade games, like foosball, air hockey, the works. It was like a really nice place. And then the rooms, like the ceilings were so high that they converted it, like all the rooms into these just epic bunk bed lounges. And the bunk beds, there were like maybe 2 or 3 that were a full sized, but everybody had their own like queen size bunk bed and they were super duper cool. I got to the wedding, the event a little bit late. Everybody went up on like Friday morning, but I worked. So I came up on like Saturday, like an hour or 2 before the wedding. And we were kind of like dancing around. My jaw started hurting because I ate croutons. Living the life. Yeah. So I didn't stay up that late. And because it was a huge shared room, there was a few people who had already passed out drunk in the room. So I did not turn on the light to go to bed. I just kind of used my phone. And then I crawled up to the top because me and Oliver in one of the top bunk beds and I laid down and I was cold. I'm always cold. So the way that they had the bunk bed set up is it wasn't just one queen mattress. It was like 2 fulls next to each other. And they all had like their own individual bedding, their own individual sheets, things like that. I just take Oliver's blanket because, fuck him. And he was out partying and I'm all curled up and I'm fucking cold still. And it's still dark. So I'm like, okay, I'm just going to get under my blanket so that I'm warm. But because my jaw's hurting, I am tossing and turning for hours. I went to bed before 9, but I probably didn't fall asleep until like after 1. And the whole time I'm just in miserable pain. I finally fall asleep. When I wake up in the morning, I am still in pain, like a little bitch. And I'm like whining. Oliver goes to find me medicine. He brings me some water and some ibuprofen and Tylenol. And I sit up and I'm chewing my medicine.
Yep, because again, Chelsea can't swallow like a normal person.
Yeah, so my jaw's hurting. I'm chewing medicine and I was cold all night and I was tossing and turning. The covers of the blanket that I was in were still kind of like relatively tucked in. It was like a very tight tuck. So I went to lift my knees up to sit up and I just pushed the blankets back and I look and there is just blood everywhere. And I was like, oh my God, I got my period in this bed. And I start fucking feeling and I look, how you can check and I like look at my underwear and I'm like,
nothing.
Not on my underwear. I get real close to the blood. I get real close like this, like right the fuck up to it.
Yeah.
And if I had to describe it, imagine blood that was applied thickly, like you're putting like a spatula into a vat of blood and just like frosting it like a cake, right? That's how much blood is on there. And I'm like, what the fuck happened? And I'm checking everything. And the realization, oh God.
What?
The realization that it wasn't my blood. It was just, oh my God. The realization that I slept in someone else's peanut butter blood hit me so fucking hard that I barrel rolled out of the bed and I pulled all the sheets off, and it was like I had a secret. And I found Oliver, and I'm like, Oliver, you have to take me home right now. And he's like, why? Are you still sick? And I'm like, look at this. And I like undo the sheet, and Oliver looks at this, and he's like, what the fuck is that? And I'm like, Oliver, it's blood, and it's not mine. Oh my God.
Oh my God.
I was like spraying hand sanitizer all over myself when I got home. I think I took a 40-minute scalding hot shower, and I will never be clean again.
I just don't understand how you didn't investigate that more. You just bounced.
What would you do?
I would be like, hello, hi, someone's blood is all over this fucking sheet.
It had to have been somebody slept in that bed, bled all the fuck over it, tucked the sheets in, it congealed, coagulated, and swelled, and then my happy ass comes in and fucking rolled
coagulated
in it.
And swelled. I would have brought it around like I was like a Jewish parent after their kid got married. You know how they would make them fuck and then air the sheet out. I would have been
chastity blanket.
Yeah, I would have been like, who?
No. Oh my
Maybe
God.
that's what it was. You were there at a wedding.
I don't think so, because Oliver was like the first one there, and the bed had been like that Seinfeld episode where they like tuck the bed in.
That sounds like the Airbnb host didn't clean those sheets properly, so that could have been a refund for the bride and groom.
I didn't want to say anything, man, because I was like, they paid all this. Everybody was staying there for free, and it was like, who do I even fucking bring it up to? I walk up to the bride, and I'm like, "Excuse me,
ma'am, there seems to have been coagulated blood on this sheet."
I just slept. I'm the jelly, and I just slept in the peanut butter blood because it's seriously like.
Also, look at this distinguished gentleman.
He looks very handsome. Hi, Apollo. I always yell at him.
I'm wearing headphones.
I've been watching a lot of husky videos on TikTok.
Yeah.
And they all remind me of just Apollo. I don't know why, because he doesn't scream.
Like he does if Cora's gone. Do you not remember that footage I posted on my close friend story from my ring? He screams bloody murder and he doesn't stop. He screamed for an hour and a half straight, no breaks.
I love it. That's what I did on the way home from the Airbnb.
And he hits that like really high octave where his throat completely opens up and it's just like, ah!
It's like a Post Malone song where he's like, ah!
You just yelled so hard that it went completely nothing to me. Your mic just cut out.
Yeah, well.
What do you want, buddy?
That's what I did when I got home. I just screamed for it. I still felt gross. Like, look at me. I've just become depression personified because I was so fucking grossed out. Look at how gross I look right now. I was going to say
I like your shirt, but okay.
I attended meetings like this today.
Yeah, I attend meetings like this, dog. What the fuck?
You look put together. Get the fuck out of my face. I'll kill you. You look fine.
I'm wearing your shirt.
I know. That's why it looks so good. All right.
Here we go.
For this? Speaking of blood and disgusting linens.
Speaking of lies and fallacies.
All right. I genuinely did my best to pull the facts from as many non-biased sources as possible. I did not go to a single conspiracy website. I did not go to a single Reddit thread. I went to actual, like National Geographic level type stuff.
Can we say a few things too? By the way, if you were talking about the Shroud of Turin, just so everyone knows, the Jesus blanket.
Just kidding, it wasn't.
The Jesus blanket that Chelsea brought up in passing, like I wouldn't hone on it a few episodes ago. And I want to say, before we get into this, because I immediately was like, I know in my heart of hearts this is all bullshit, fake nonsense. But I went to go look up, like, there was a TED Talk about it, which I consider to be, I don't know, the Holy Grail.
Jewish guy's TED Talk?
Yep, exactly.
Uh-huh.
And I was upset at how YouTube immediately suggested all of the religious paraphernalia, like all of the religious people, like the Catholic diocese and shit, all their fucking videos first. I'm like, suck my dick backwards, dude. Are you fucking kidding me? Like, show me the non-biased opinion. Show me the atheist talking scientific fact exclusively.
And you got the atheist Jews guy in a TED Talk.
Yeah, but like even that was still like
it didn't close. Tell you what you wanted to hear, so you didn't like it.
No, it did tell me a lot of things, but it just, I don't know.
All right. Well, for those of you who are confused, this entire episode stems from a one-off comment I made about Jesus having blood type AB. And Noelle honed in on it like a heat-seeking missile. And here we are.
I had no idea that this was even a thing that existed. How did you know that this was a thing?
I feel like I was born knowing about it.
Who told you? Your church?
I've never existed in a world where I haven't known that the Shroud of Turin exists.
It was like, it's all fucking Greek to me, dude. Everything that you were saying about it.
I made a point to put the actual Shroud of Turin at the head of this document because when I showed you like the X-ray picture of it, you're like, that's so fake. And I'm like, that's not what it actually looks like. This is what it looks like here. So let's describe what the Shroud of Turin is. And I pulled this from Wikipedia, which I thought was fairly unbiased. Quote, the Shroud of Turin is a length of linen cloth bearing the negative image of a man. Some claim the image depicts Jesus of Nazareth, and the fabric is the burial shroud in which he was wrapped after crucifixion. That's like the nuts and bolts there, the Shroud of Turin. So before we jump into the actual debate around the Shroud of Turin, I want to like cover some of the more non-debatable facts. And this is paraphrased from history.com.
Reliable source.
I thought so. So first, the Shroud of Turin's first historical documentation that we found comes from Liry, France in the mid-1300s. And I want to point out that we're not counting the Bible.
Thank you.
Is mentioned in the Bible in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the four Gospels, but its first like accepted source, the mid-1300s. The shroud was presented to the dean of the Church of Liry by a French knight named Geoffroy de Charny, and there is no evidence of where he actually got the shroud or where it had been in its previous, like, quote unquote, 1300 years of existence. In 1389, a French bishop named Pierre d'Arcis reported to Pope Clement VII. And this pope, I looked it up, is the one who refused to let Henry VIII divorce his first wife, Catherine, to marry Anne Boleyn. So this is about the time frame. Anyway, Pierre tried to get the Pope to say that the shroud was a work of a forgery artist. So in response, the Pope did declare the shroud was a fake. And this was in 1389.
Yeah, I agree.
The shroud bounced around for a while. Different people owned it. It was kept in different families of affluence. Different religious clergy had it for a while. And then it was involved in a fire in 1502, which is why when you look at the shroud, there's like those weird burned bits on it. That's from the main fire. And after that, it was subsequently transferred to the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist, which is located in Turin, in 1578, and has remained there ever since with an asterisk. It was moved in World War II because of the Nazis. But this is where it gets its famous name of the Shroud of Turin.
It was also like restored after the fire.
Yes, there are parts that you can see on here where the linen is significantly lighter. That is where it was repaired by nuns. It also has a backing on it.
Liars for Christ.
It also has a backing on it that was also added, and we'll definitely go into that too. But we can post a picture of what the shroud looks like, or you can Google it. It just looks like a piece of cloth that wiped up a bunch of coffee.
That is what it looks like.
What it looks like. So for those of you who have not seen the fabric, just make a note that if you do Google it, a lot of the images you see will be Photoshopped enhancements. And that's because the cloth itself isn't very remarkable. Most of us probably wouldn't pay it a second chance. Like, I personally think the coolest part of it is that it has clearly been folded. And you know, when you like fold up paper and then you cut a design in it like a snowflake, the burns and the stains kind of make those weird designs. Like, it almost looks like a Rorschach test. I think that's the most interesting thing, but you have to look really hard to see any image of a man on it. And it's not remarkable. Like, we'll just call it #facts.
Yeah.
But if you look at it real close and actually invert the image so that you can see it's negative, that's when the image of a man appears, and it looks as if it's burned into the fabric itself. So it's easy to see why something like this would gain traction in the religious world, especially when Christianity's most famous victim of crucifixion was none other than Jesus himself. So let's jump into the 1970s. During this decade, the Shroud of Turin research project made the claim that the cloth had stains consistent with the wounds of what could have come with a crucifixion. And it was this group who really reignited the thought that this was a bona fide burial cloth of a crucifixion victim. They weren't necessarily making the argument that it was the cloth that wrapped up Christ after his death.
Yeah, it had the wounds on the hands and the feet, and it also had blood in where it would have been like a, what is that called?
Spear destiny.
Yeah. A spear being jabbed between your rib cage.
It definitely looks like a crucifixion victim.
But everyone was getting crucified. It was nothing special. That was just the way of the day.
Absolutely. I 100% agree. And I think that's why it's important that they weren't necessarily they were just trying to see if it was an actual crucifixion linen cloth. But obviously with something like this, Jesus is just going to come along with it. And it is fair to dismiss the shroud as one of those like Jesus in the French toast type of miracles. Humans notably put patterns and faces into everything we see. But the shroud takes on a kind of a life of its own. And that's why it's so hotly debated.
Looks like negative film. Like when you get a negative film reel and you put it up to the light to look at it.
Yeah.
Like that's what the shroud looks like.
Yeah. And the image is like almost so clear that it is, I would look at it and I'd be like, there's no way that could be created from the times, like maybe modern times. And I think that's also part of why people are like, fake, that's fake. There's no technology that would allow somebody to do that. But that kind of comes along with the debate surrounding the shroud. And that's because science cannot nail down exactly what it is. We know it's a linen cloth, but as far as like the image, that's where we're going to get into a little bit more of the discussion surrounding the controversy of the shroud. Because a test will come along and be like, this is proof. And then another one will say, not proof, proof, not proof, proof, not proof. But they never actually challenge each other. And the tests that they're doing are all scientific tests. So it just kind of depends on what you want to pick and choose and believe. So we're going to try to present it and let people make up their own mind. So in 1988, my birth year, there was a group of scientists from the United States and Switzerland who got together and carbon dated the shroud. They found that it did not come from 33 AD and were able to place its origin date as part of the Middle Ages, sometime between 1260 and 1390. This is from history.com again.
Yeah.
But in 2013, another group of scientists from Italy used infrared light and spectroscopy, which is basically carbon dating with lasers, and more accurately placed the shroud's creation as sometime between 280 BCE and 220 CE, which would have been roughly when Christ would have been 33 years old.
That feels just like too... I hate that. I hate that not because I'm like, it disproves. It almost just bolsters my conspiracy that people have come together recently to try to justify that this is Jesus because we are straying away from the lies of Christianity and going to reality-based facts.
So
they're like, actually, not from the Middle Ages, even though the fucking Jesus that you see on that shroud looks like a man from the Middle Ages. It does not look like a Middle Eastern Jewish man from 280 BCE. It looks like the Roman Catholic, like,
looks
Henry
like
the fucking 8th version.
No, it looks like a Middle Eastern Jesus.
No,
if someone showed that to me, I'd be like, it looks like Jesus.
That man is a skinny Caucasian.
Right. You are lying to yourself. Look at that. Oh my God. Noelle, I'm not going to say it out loud. I'll text it to you, but like, look at that. Look at that. Look at it.
No, that's not
Jewish
even.
Man.
That's not
Jewish
even.
Man.
That is a skinny, slim-faced man from the mountains of Caucasus.
All right. Well, whatever. All I'm saying is what happened and what they say went wrong with the original carbon dating is that they pulled from the edges because everybody's too scared to obviously cut into the main image itself. And the edges were repaired by Middle Eastern nuns. That's the explanation of why the original carbon dating was wrong. I dare say. But some things to note, and I'm not going to like fully swing one side or the other, Noelle, so this paragraph is for you. Churches in medieval times were required by religious law to have.
Nice, you weren't going to sound that one out.
I know. I thought when I was fucking typing it out, I'm like, how do you say canonical? Is it canonical? Canonical? Is it canonical?
Canonical.
Well, I would have nailed it. Damn it. I just got to believe in myself, you know? But they were literally required to have a religious relic in their possession or in their possession at some time. So this is why so many churches, specifically like Roman Catholic churches in Europe, old churches, have the remnants of martyrs that are on display. And in fact, there was a huge fad called catacomb saints that went on between the 16th and 19th centuries, where the catacombs of Rome were essentially raided and exhumed for early Christian bodies, which were then decorated in gold and precious stones, and then shipped off to different churches to serve as their required holy relics.
I kind of love that, though. I feel like putting a holy relic inside of a church actually gives it power.
I found one that is so fucking cool, and I'm going to send you a picture of it now. It's like a Bavarian martyr that they have. I'm not going to be able to find it now, but like, look, I'll just send you like the Google link. But if you just do Bavarian holy relic, and they have these like giant gold adornments of just like a single piece of like femur bone. It's insane. I'll Slack it to you.
I'm such a fan.
Oh my God, that would be like really cool to do something about like some of these religious relics because there's a ton of hoaxes.
Yeah, no shit. Like this shroud.
because what would happen is some of these churches were so desperate to be listed as like an authentic church, or like the bishops or the church leaders in there were greedy for money or like the stability that churches provide. That they fucking faked it. They faked their holy relics for authenticity. And in fact, the Museum of the Bible, which I didn't know existed, in Washington, D.C., actually came out in 2018 and said that after extensive testing, they discovered that some of their artifacts were fake. And the museum came forward because they wanted to show that they are dedicated to scientific authenticity of their exhibits, and they didn't want the public to believe that science and nature cannot go hand in hand. So a bunch of the Dead Sea Scrolls that were discovered in 2018, this museum actually came out and said like 8 of them were fake or proved fake.
I knew it.
So hard pill to swallow on that one. So Not really.
I mean, as long as they're peace and love, as long as there are gullible people of religion, there will always be pirates making fakes. The greatest example recently is with the Mormons, and which also I think proves everything that we need to know, because like it's just the perfect allegory, right? Like this dude's like, I found a bunch of Mormon historical documents that would prove the gospel wrong, and the church was like, I will pay, and there is no amount I will not pay to like not get those from being leaked, because so same shit. Same shit.
Can we actually go off on like a slight Mormon tangent real quick?
I love them.
Did you see that soaking? People are being made aware of soaking. I had no idea that people didn't know about the Mormon soak. And for those of you who don't know what the Mormon soak is, the act of vaginal penetration by a penis isn't necessarily losing virginity, according to some. It's the thrusting. Mm-hmm. So what's happening is people are convincing their romantic partners to penetrate vaginally and then not move. But there's a part two, because you bring in your thrust buddy who bounces the bed and gyrates the bed so that you can soak in your romantic partner, and your friend wiggles the bed so that you're not causing the movement of, you're not causing, the penis to go in and out. Mm-hmm. It's the shaking. And so you still are a virgin in the eyes of God.
Yeah. No one knows about soaking besides these fucking weirdos in this goddamn state.
Dude, I was talking to Mia, our beautiful Australian friend, and people are asking her if it's real. And I'm like, I know people who used to soak.
I never thought that it was real because it just seems so outlandish to me. Just like get fucked in the ass, losers. Right. But I now realize that it is real. Yeah. It felt like a meme, but I guess it is real, and I guess people do it. But
so real, Well, because the guy I knew who had soak in girls was not Mormon, but that's how he convinced Mormon girls to have sex. He's like, let's just soak.
Wow.
Could you imagine though?
How is anyone getting off? Like, peace and love, like 17 vibrators have to be on like full blast on my clit for me to feel anything. I couldn't just like chill there. Like I couldn't just
It's not about the girl in that point. Let's just be honest. It's not about the girl.
Even for them. What the
They're
fuck are you
stupid. They don't know. They're so
That's like the same dude who is like on YouTube, like, I can make myself come mentally without touching myself. Have you seen those videos? Cringe. Same That's shit. Weird. Have you seen? You haven't seen those?
No, but I should interview one of them.
I don't want to talk to that man.
These dudes tell girls like, "Well, then let's just soak," and then they get in there and they're like, "You feel so good. I'll love you forever." And then the girls all caught up in the moment, and then they agree to mild thrusting. Anyway,
gotta love them.
See, circle back.
I bet they wish they were Catholics. They could just go do some Hail Marys about it.
Or they just do it in the butt.
True. God's back door.
Yeah. Fine.
Can't see.
So let's, for God's sakes, let's circle back to the shroud.
In the butt. I said, what? You know what I mean? Be a real Mormon. Honor Christ by only doing anal.
Yeah. You fucking posers.
And then this is gonna be too graphic.
Can't take the sacrament after it though.
Because the whole thing is like, you can't spill your seed, right? You know what? Guess what? You can't get pregnant in your ass. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
So you're welcome, Christian woman.
You went to Bible camp. So
real quick. So many hand jobs happened on that bus too. Again, no one's vag is being penetrated, but seed was spilled, and that is a crime in the eyes of God. So be a real Christian woman. And unprotected sex in the ass exclusively.
Yeah, and then you just do a handstand after. So it stays in there.
You cough it out.
Yeah. Oh, gross.
Anyway.
But speaking of stuff leaking out of your anus, the Vatican really wanted to throw whatever they could at the shroud.
Like little boys?
Yeah. No, they used the shroud to hide the little boys.
So good.
But they wanted to throw whatever they could at the shroud and see how well it could hold up to scientific scrutiny. They didn't want to be caught with their pants down, so to speak.
They get caught doing that
again,
every other day.
So in the Bible, the crucifixion story is very well documented, including the fact that Jesus was wrapped in a linen cloth. He was anointed with aloe and myrrh. And according to Christian belief, on Easter Sunday, Jesus rose from the dead and left an empty tomb.
With a bunny inside of it and eggs.
For some linen fabric behind. Now, the shroud, if the shroud is really the linen which wrapped up Jesus's body, then it disappeared for a whopping 1,300 years before it was brought to France.
That's a long fucking time. That's a long fucking time, dog, for some shit to go down to a piece of fabric. Also, like, peace and love. Where the fuck was it previous to that? It just appeared. That's the bullshit. We have no idea. See, that's what I'm saying. Just like I would also, if I was a religious leader, be like, we've got to fucking, what's something in the Bible that we can, manifest into reality that we can create, just like the fucking Dead Sea Scrolls, dude.
The goblet, the chalice of Christ,
the Holy Grail.
Yeah. Why couldn't I think of that?
Because you're stupid.
Yeah, it's because I've been mixing wine and beer this whole episode, and it's just melting my stupid brain.
It's disgusting.
It's not. It's a spritzer.
It's not a spritzer. That's beer and fucking wine.
It's a Utah spritzer. I'm a Utah virgin, and I'm drinking Utah spritzer.
I had a fucking alcoholic Arnold Palmer in a can last night. Bro, that
sounds good. I think I've had one of those before.
Oh my God. It wasn't a twisted tea, unfortunately, but it was like, it literally had a little picture of the little golf man. It tasted like straight up tea. It tasted perfect. I could even taste sometimes like the alcohol in like a Vizzy or a White Claw. Like, it doesn't taste like seltzer water to me. It tastes like alcoholic seltzer water. This shit straight up what I would call frat boy juice. It tastes just like an Arnold Palmer, almost zero alcohol. I chugged 2.
You know
on the
what?
walk to the movie theater.
I bet you are peeing out your butthole because of mild alcohol poisoning.
No, I didn't go that hard.
I said mild.
I was on stimulants.
You soaked.
I did soak.
Alcohol poisoning.
I did. I did soak substances.
That is also fun. But maybe that's it. Maybe you hallucinated too hard, and now ghosts are coming out of your butt.
It feels like that, dog. It feels like that.
So, and it's like you said. Where the fuck was the shroud for 1,300 years before Geoffrey de Charny brought it to France?
Whipped up, dog. Getting whipped up.
So let's go into the conspiracy of forgery.
Yeah, conspiracy in italics and bold, underlined.
So first, the first of these forger conspiracies is that it was created by somebody painting on the linen itself or painting on glass and then setting up the glass so that the sun kind of like burned the shadow
basically image. Like an old school photograph.
Yeah. And some skeptics say that like maybe the forger painted a corpse and then wrapped the linen around it, or that they actually inflicted those wounds on somebody for the sake of like recreating the crucifixion in some weird
Christians have done worse for less.
Yeah. Or that they like put the linen over a living person, pretended that those wounds were real, and then like made it damp so that it would kind of like soak on them. My favorite theory is that Leonardo da Vinci managed to create a process one could only describe as a medieval photograph.
I believe it.
I think that's the funnest one, like the funnest forgery. It's hard to like really nail down what, if any of those were possible though, just because there are qualities to the shroud that forgery explanations don't account for. So in 1898, an Italian lawyer named Segundo Pia was tasked with taking the first photos of the shroud. And now old photography required the use of negatives, which is the first time modern man actually saw the full image of the shroud in all its glory. That's one I posted here. So what happened was this guy took a picture of the shroud, and when he held up the negative, that's when he saw like the more realized image of the crucifixion victim that was burned into the shroud. But artistic skeptics do argue that this isn't a true negative, or that the colors on this negative don't really match what Christ was described to look like. So
like
the only explanation, they were like, if this was a crucifixion victim, they would have had to be an albino, which is not mentioned of Jesus in the Bible. And there are no historical documents ever saying that Jesus or the Messiah was an albino, which is what this negative seems to suggest. And they're like, if it was something like that, it would be fucking mentioned in the Bible. So it wasn't until 1978 that the shroud was fully investigated, again, by that research team. And it consisted of American researchers and scientists. They were allowed full access to the shroud for 5 days. And their job was to see where the image on the linen came from or how it could have formed. So in this group was a Jewish photographer who later went on to do a TED Talk named Barry Schwartz. And he actually originally turned down the project because he's Jewish and had literally no interest in Christ whatsoever. But for the sake of science, like he finally did kind of get talked into it.
For the sake of science and also a free trip to Italy.
Yes, that's why he did take the trip fully. He was like, I wanted a free trip to Italy. But he was surprised that upon his initial examination, he said it was obviously not a painting. And what he meant by that was that there were no pigment deposits or brush strokes on the fabric. And he was also surprised that repairs had been made to the shroud, which consisted of replacement sections from a fire and that backing fabric. And this is where that incorrect carbon dating comes from, because people were just taking clips of the edges, which were all repaired. And the team was also surprised that during their examination that the shroud was 100% without a doubt a photograph, painting, or some other work of art. But just because it wasn't those things doesn't necessarily that they knew what it was exactly. They just couldn't find evidence that of any like photographic history or any pigment or any other art form like charcoal deposits that we knew of at the time. They did get all of their evidence peer reviewed and published, but the art world, surprisingly enough, were the ones who really came hard at these scientists, because they're like, just because you know something about like carbon dating doesn't mean you know anything about like artistic history.
Yeah.
Specifically forgery. And there was one man who was kind of part of the research team who did disagree with the shroud's authenticity, but he actually never went to Turin to examine the cloth itself. But he does say it's something more akin to just being a really good painting. I didn't want to pull his stuff really into the podcast episode because there's other people who actually did examine the shroud and have evidence against it. But I do want to like do my due diligence and say out of this entire research team, one person didn't think it was real. And it was the only one who didn't examine it. Interesting enough. But the research team like absolutely disputes the idea that this could be a painting. There's no reasonable explanation how a painting could be applied to a linen without pigments that actually penetrate the fibers. And they claim that during medieval times, it was common for people to make physical copies of images, which by like making a tracing with paint. So they do say that there are paint deposits on the shroud, but not enough for them to actually conclude that the shroud is a painting. So basically there are areas where there is paint, but it's not prevalent enough for them to explain other colors that are burned into the fabric.
Prevalent enough as in something, 1,300 years of being missing couldn't have erased.
Well, it could be erased, but the fact that there is a clear image and that image is not created by paint.
That we know of.
That we scientifically cannot determine. And another compelling piece of evidence came through after the research team put the linen through a piece of equipment called a VPA analyzer. And then it gave like no further explanation what that fucking was. So according to Google, I was like, what? I've never heard of that. Is that like a drink? Get it?
V8. Nice one. You're good.
I know. According to Google, this piece of tech uses X-rays to convert image density into a topographical image. So basically what happened is they analyzed the density of the fabric, and they could see that once they analyzed it, a topographical 3D image of a person was there. Essentially what that means is the hardness of how some of that color is applied in the linen when they analyzed it did take shape of a body. So it goes against the idea that this could be a painting, but what it also could be is that somebody placed a fabric over a person and did more of like a rubbing or tapped pigment on it. So it doesn't necessarily disprove that it wasn't created by somebody with artistic features, but it definitely disproves that it was a painting. The researchers do kind of scoff at this dismissal that it could still be a piece of art. Because they say that if anyone on Earth could possibly make a linen composite via rubbing in the same way, that they will dismiss the shroud as fraud once and for all. But just because we don't know how to do it now doesn't really mean we didn't know how to do it then, and the art form was just lost. Otherwise, we would explain every fucking thing in the anthropological world.
Which is it doesn't exist. We lose information. I mean, NASA claims that they lost the formulas that got us to the moon, so.
Which are lying. They just don't want to go back to the moon because they know that they couldn't go back to the moon because we never went to the moon.
I mean,
So facts now.
I mean, you know how I feel about the moon landing. I think that we had to fake it because we were in the middle of a Cold War and we needed to get a dub over Russia. But anyway. I
have the biggest piece of chocolate in my mouth.
Yeah, good. Just because this isn't a fully realized piece of art, as in someone sat with an easel and a fucking paintbrush and did it, doesn't mean that it's not a forged image.
Right. And I do agree. Just because it's not a painting paintings are not the only art form that exists.
Yeah.
I do think that the science that we can measure the weight of an image.
No, yeah. I think the realism of it would suggest that there was someone underneath it or around it. So that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. And another thing is, according to the Bible, Jesus was a bloody pulp at the time of crucifixion. He was whipped with a special kind of Roman torture device called a flagrum that had a bunch of leather thongs on the end of it. But at the end of each of those thongs was a weight, so that when you're getting whipped, there's an intense power behind it and it would just cut you the fuck up.
Yeah.
And a forensic pathologist studied the shroud and did make the argument that you can see 120 or more of these whip marks on the body of the cloth. He also pointed out how many artistic renditions do show that when Jesus was crucified, the nails went through his hands. But most of us know now that that's a very incorrect belief. The Roman crucifixions handled the nails going through the human body, through the wrists and through the ankles, not necessarily through the palms and your feet. But the Shroud of Turin does show the correct placement of where the nails would have had to go. Most of us know that. Nails go through the wrists. But what I did not know, and I would argue most of us don't know, is that we have a nerve that runs through our wrists. So if you were to be crucified, it would automatically cause your thumbs to curl in so that you were almost like you're showing someone the number 4. That's never depicted really in art. But if you look at the Shroud of Turin, the way that his hands are, his thumbs are not visible. And the pathologist argues this is because the shroud is displaying a real crucifixion victim fucking perfectly, in the sense that their thumbs are not showing. He also points out that the wound that Jesus would have gotten from that spear of destiny piercing his rib would not have leaked only blood, but it would have been a mixture of blood and water, just based on the nature of his injuries. When you fall down and your knee gets really swollen and you get water on the knee, it would have been that same type of injury. And interestingly enough, the shroud does have a spot on the chest wound where the blood is diluted or the pigment is diluted with water. Another pathologist looked at the shroud and believes that the reason some of the blood stains flow in such a way indicates that, this is the interesting part, that whoever was wrapped in the shroud was alive following the crucifixion. And this piece of evidence comes up because another pathologist looked at it and was if this person was wrapped up, the blood, and were dead, the blood wouldn't have been flowing. There wouldn't have been any of these weird deposits. If I were examining this in a crime, I would say this person was alive when they were wrapped in the shroud. So therefore, according to the Bible, it can't be Jesus because Jesus died on the cross.
Yeah.
If Jesus didn't die on the cross, then the entire argument that the Christian religion is based on is a lie. Which is why I do want to point out that all the evidence that the Vatican curated to prove whether or not the Shroud of Turin was real or fake was recorded. There are parts of this video recording that were lost.
Oh, yeah, conveniently. Yeah, that's very convenient for them.
And we will get back to that. So, all these wounds beg the question, how can somebody endure that many injuries to their body and not shed one drop of blood? So, the stains on the shroud that look like blood were tested by this research team in the 70s, and they actually had a really hard time finding any viable blood on it to test. The research team who did the analysis and found blood were the representatives from the Vatican, the representatives whose video evidence of the blood test was mysteriously lost and or destroyed.
So the only people who say that they found blood on it were the Catholic Vaticans. The Catholics from the Vatican.
Yes. But if the Vaticans found running blood in the shroud and proved it was real blood, according to the forensic pathologist, that means that the person who was wrapped in the shroud was not killed during their crucifixion, which leads to the point that the Vatican knows something and they're trying to fucking hide it. Specifically, Jesus did not die on the cross, which would completely wipe out the entire premise of the New Testament.
Because the Vatican is saying that the shroud is Jesus, or is the Vatican saying it's just a dude?
The Vatican says this is a relic, and they do not recognize it as like a specific miracle the way that they do other religious relics. They're like, yep, it's an artifact of history that shows Christianity, and that's the bare fucking minimum.
So they're essentially saying this is just a guy who was crucified. It's not necessarily Jesus.
Barely. They're saying it might as well be a really cool piece of art that just shows how much people love Christ.
Okay.
They put this, I dare say, on the same fucking level as if I drew a picture of Jesus in Bible school.
Okay.
They both show my love of Christ. They're both really valid ways to celebrate a religion.
This is Jesus toast. This is Jesus toast.
And the conspiracy is that they don't want to release the fact that they tested actual blood on the shroud, because then they're put in the corner of, if this is really Jesus who was crucified, then why the fuck was he alive when he was wrapped up in this linen?
Yeah.
Which really is the hang up for me, because like, you can believe the shroud is real or fake, but the Vatican hiding evidence about it, I believe 100% is a fucking fact that they don't want something to get out about this shroud, which makes it way more interesting to me.
Yeah, no, I agree to that. I mean, it's interesting that the crux of it all is if there was blood found on it, that would mean that the person was still alive when they were wrapped in it. And I guess for me, I don't understand the importance of Jesus dying on the cross. What would it matter if he died in the cave?
Because the idea was that Jesus died on the cross for our sins, not that Jesus was tortured on the cross, moved into a cave, and then expired then. There is like a sect of religious conspiracy saying that Joseph actually had a separate tomb and that Jesus lived and survived the crucifixion, which it also would like completely undermine the Bible. Essentially, like there are various religions where if you undermine the Bible, it completely undermines their entire belief system because they take the Bible literally.
Okay.
For people who don't take the Bible literally, it's like, I don't know what it matters. I'm sure it matters, but I'm not educated in that regard.
I mean, I guess it just kind of fucks up all your imagery about the cross being so special.
Well, and it's also the same thing as like, what if Jesus had a kid? it may not specifically be mentioned in the Bible, but people don't want to think about Jesus and Mary Magdalene getting together. But most people do agree he did get together. But since it's not mentioned in the Bible, people just don't talk about it. I do think that Jesus dying on the cross is important because that is like a foundation of like Christian belief, because that's like one of the affirmations that you say to not deny Christ, as I understand it. And I could see the Vatican trying to hide that, because the Vatican is very much like the Bible is 100% literal.
I just feel like if your whole entire religion's going to fall apart because he died in a cave and not on a cross, then your religion was going to fall apart no matter what.
I agree. But I do want to point out that this theory did slightly change in 2015, but that's only because some DNA was pulled from the shroud, but it was only tested for its mitochondrial DNA. It didn't undergo the same forensic analysis, which would have been really fucking cool, because then we could have known if the person actually did die on the cross or after.
Why wouldn't they? They just don't want to. They just don't want to get answers.
Yeah. And all this specific test in 2015 did was prove that the mitochondrial DNA from the shroud is linked to areas in the Middle East. And in fact, one of the scientists who analyzed the DNA says, and I quote, "One of the most abundant human mitochondrial haptolytes among those discovered on the shroud is still very rare in Western Europe and is typical of the Druze community, an ethnic group that has some origin in Egypt and that lives mainly in restricted areas in Syria, Jordan, Lebanon, Israel, and Palestine." And I thought that was important to include, like, Jesus wasn't white.
Yeah, always. I mean, I've known this, but if Jesus was real, he wasn't white. People hate, it's that trend of like what something people aren't ready to hear. That's it. If Jesus was real, then he wasn't white.
I'll do you one better. What is not in the Bible and people think it is? White people.
Yeah, 1,000%.
Yeah.
Just because his name's Joseph doesn't mean he's white.
Yeah. They had the name first.
They always did.
So in conclusion, the shroud is the most studied artifact in human history. That's period, point blank. It just is. But we still don't know what it is. There are teams of scientists who pick up the cause and go back and forth on what it is exactly. But we still have no definitive proof on whether it's a medieval fake or whether it's really a crucifixion cloth that wrapped a person in it shortly after or during their death. Forensic evidence goes both ways. Scientific analysis goes both ways. So it's really up to you to decide if it's a crucifixion cloth or a very convincing piece of art.
Do you want to believe that it's a crucifixion cloth of Jesus or of just someone who's been crucified?
I do want to believe that it is like a crucifixion cloth of Jesus, because I think that's really fucking cool to think about. But I also try to find some like really cool evidence of saying that like this was like an alien anomaly. I found some stuff that I probably should have brought up in it. It just went back to more carbon dating, but I didn't want to seem too biased, but I might as well fucking bring it up now.
Here we go.
There was actually, in the Bible, it mentions like some anomalies, like earth anomalies, which would probably interpret as like an earthquake or a volcano that occurred after Jesus died. And we do have geographical evidence and historical evidence that something did happen around 33 AD, and like deposits that happened during those sorts of cataclysmic events were found on the shroud, which I thought was cool. I don't really know what it is. I think it would be cool if it was an actual image that was burned into a shroud one way or another, because that's just cool, I think.
Yeah.
Does my whole religious faith hinge on whether or not this is real or fake? No.
Sure. That's fair.
I don't know. I'm kind of dumb. I am dumb, not even kind of dumb. What do you think it is, a fake or a crucifixion cloth?
I don't think it's anything to do with Jesus or Christianity. Mm-hmm. I think that something that Christians like to mow over is the fact that everyone was getting crucified.
Yes.
It was the way you got rid of your poor people and your thieves and the people you didn't like. It was just as common as drinking water. So I feel like everyone holding on to the fact that, oh no, this is Jesus, just proves to the point that people still refuse to recognize that crucifixion wasn't something special that was only done for Jesus Christ.
Right. Yeah, I agree. Like, I think the most compelling thing about it is the science essentially says, like, this is not a piece of art, but I do think it, like, but the fact that they don't really know what it is. I read one explanation that when those earthquakes and stuff happen, like, there's like huge uranium deposits that come out, and those can cause burns in fabric. So they're like, yeah, this guy was like in an underground cave, and then there was a huge fucking earthquake, and there was like a weird scientific chemical anomaly that caused the fabric to take the deposit from his skin. And I was like, oh, I'd buy that.
Yeah. I would buy that more than anything.
So.
But yeah, it's interesting.
It is. Did you think that, I'm surprised that you hadn't heard of it, but I'm glad that that one-off comment sprouted an entire episode.
Why would I know about it?
I just assumed it's like the Holy Grail. People just know about it, whether you're Christian or not. And you went to Bible camp.
Yeah.
HJ's on the bus.
I went to Bible camp for like maybe 2 years, and no one was talking about the Shroud of Turin.
I honestly, genuinely cannot remember where I heard about it. I did not hear about it in church.
If I probably would have stayed going to like Catholic church with my grandma, maybe I would have heard about it, because it definitely seems like, I don't know, the imagery on it just looks very Catholic to me, very Roman Catholic. Like, that's what also makes me sus about it, though, is that the actual image on it looks like a Roman Catholic painting of Jesus. Those are some of my favorite depictions of Jesus, because they're of like this scrawny, deteriorating skeletal man suffering, bleeding out, and very elongated features, looking in pain. And that's what I would describe the shroud as well. And that's just very Roman Catholic to me. So, you know.
I'd agree. I thought the coolest part of this was all the forensics that went into it. That's what sold me the most, was when the forensic guys came in and they're like, this is just like fucking physical science. And it was stuff that you can understand. You know, they're like, this is how blood spurts from this area. And I was like, I've seen Law and Order SVU. I can comprehend this.
Yeah.
But this spouted like other things we could probably talk about. Friend of the podcast, Michael, mentioned like Gnostic religions, and there's also like mystery cults that existed that they're just cults in history, and we don't know what they worshipped, but we know they existed. Might be fun to talk about, but
yeah, always. I mean, we are getting ready to dip our toes into Spooktober, where we try to keep on a brand on a theme. So if these cults are doing anything bloody and weird, absolutely.
Yeah. And if anyone has anything they want to listen to, definitely let us know.
Yeah.
Don't just let Noelle decide by yelling at me. So
I will. I don't know. There's a lot of things I feel about this. Number one, though, I don't think it's anything to do with Christianity. If anything, it's either a burial shroud from, the countless unnamed people who were crucified back in the day, or a piece of medieval art, which kind of is what I lean towards, just based off of it visually. Because I don't know if you've seen, like, the 3D renditions of what Jesus would have looked like. Doesn't look like that.
Yeah, no. But I will say, it is good to have you back. The solo episode was rough.
I can't believe you did one by yourself.
I didn't enjoy it. I thought I would. I had like 6 pages of notes, which is about what we try to type out for like a full hour episode. And it took 20 minutes to get through it.
See what'll happen when I'm not interrupting you?
Yeah.
Or we're not going off on a tangent.
I felt was so weird. I was like doing my talks and looking into the camera to blackness, just a reflection of my own shitty head. I was like, this is the worst.
Oh, I'm proud of you for doing it though. I told you to bring someone else on, but
I only know boys who are willing to do it, and all of my friends who are girls were in fucking New Orleans. So what was I going to do? And I'm too scared to bring a boy onto the podcast ever since our our reading
said no snakes, which are men. So that is true. That's a good point.
So I was like, I don't know what to fucking do. I just suffer. So.
Good point. Good point. I will say, for those who don't follow me on Instagram, the best piece of information I got from New Orleans was from our cemetery tour. And it was that still to this day, it's very common for bones to come up. That is just the topography of the area and the land. It's essentially just a swamp, which is why they're in the above ground catacombs, to try to prevent the ground from lifting bodies up. But the most common bone to make it to the top of the surface is you have three little bones in your ear. Those ones, because they're the lightest and the smallest, so they'll pop up. Anytime you see one of those style of tombs and graves, they typically have rocks all over the ground, and that's also to help keep down bones and conceal them if they do come up. So while we were standing next to one of the sites, one family had put white rocks down, also white because it gets super hot, reflecting. And the plot next to them was just dirt and grass growing, and in it you could see bone fragments popping up. Thought that was super interesting. And they just crack those bitches open and just stack you in there. The temperatures get so hot that they say a year and a day is when you go back to the spot, because they've just turned into dust fragments essentially. Really? And then they sweep. So that's where the saying, I wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole, comes from, because there's a little trap, essentially a trap door for where you take your little bone dust pole and you push all the remains down so that you could stack the next body in there. So
they're just, you're Jenga with bodies.
Yeah.
Is basically it.
Yep, but you disintegrate essentially, and then you just get shoveled down to the bottom, and then, start the process over again. Mm. Interesting though, right?
Yeah.
And there are, thankfully now, because New Orleans is essentially, no one even can fathom the amount of unmarked graves that make up that entire fucking state, and specifically in the city county of New Orleans. But now they have rules and regulations for cemeteries and plots and stuff like that. But it's kind of like a catch-22, because there are burial sites disintegrating into dust, into open. They have opened, you can look in and see remains, and they can't be touched or preserved by these preservation societies because they need express permission from the families and or any living relative, and for some of them there are none. And
it's so weird. Yeah. You can't preserve a body without permission. That should just be human fucking morality.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's cool because I got to see dead bodies.
You did post some. It just looked like they were just straight up chilling out in the dirt. It almost looked like what you'd see in a horror movie.
Yeah. Just sun-bleached white bones.
That is neat. It would be really fun to go there. I hope what we learn on Saturday with our ghost tour has cool stuff that we didn't know about. I'm hoping for the best, and I'm not preparing for the worst. I'll wear a coat. That's going to be as much as I'm preparing for.
That is a good thing to prepare for. I don't know anything about Ogden, so I'll learn something.
I've been on tours through the Ben Lomond before that were super fucking interesting. And I know that there are a ton of haunted places in Ogden, like Smiles Photography. I thought about reaching out to them and asking them if we could do an episode there or an episode about it. But I'm not #lazy.
I mean, ask them if we can film there. Some of the most compelling ghost footage and audio I've ever seen is from people who were doing a live stream and they couldn't hear anything, but then when you played it back, you heard stuff.
I do want to get like the equipment to record that. So let's like look into getting like a spirit box or whatever, especially when we go to Arizona.
Yeah, I mean, we promised the people a ghost episode for October, so things have to happen.
Cora sounds like a fucking ghost, by the way. I thought someone was moaning when we first got on, and it's just Cora breathing.
They're sleeping, don't you see?
I like that she has the bed, and Apollo just head tucked under the wooden entertainment system.
Cora! Come here. They were out.
What?
Big stretch. Look at that big stretch.
Cuties.
Come here, Nasty.
Sounds like someone's getting an exorcism. You know what I miss? 10 seconds of silence to cancel out Cora's breathing.
Oh. She's so gross. She's so smelly. She can't get another bath for like another week because she's still got her stitches. You
got to get her dry shampoo. That's why I got Puff.
I usually bathe her once a week because she stinks like butts. She's extra stinky.
Look at how happy she is. Just making a beeline back for
her to go armpits smell like a human.
Oh, sick.
I know. Okay, let's get out of here.
All right. Hail linens.
Hail Satan.
Okay.